Young countries that had arisen out of the collapsed USSR have inherited a lot of once powerful military and scientific facilities. The most dangerous and classified of them were urgently shut down and evacuated to Russia. But many of the facilities were just abandoned. They were left behind to rust. Because most of emerging countries' economies just couldn't cope with the maintenance of the facilities. There wasn't anybody who wanted them. 10th place. An underground submarine base in resort town Balaklava, Crimea. According to the insiders, this top-secret submarine force base was a transit point, where submarines, including nuclear ones, were repaired, fueled, and loaded equipment. It was a giant complex built for centuries. It could repel nuclear blasts and accommodate up to 14 submarines. The military base was built in 1961 and abandoned in 1993. It was broke down to the bolts by locals after that. In 2002, the government decided to create a museum complex on the ruins of the base. Local businessmen would readily take anyone who wanted to visit. 9th place. The Kola Super Deep Borehole in Murmansk Oblast. It's the deepest borehole in the world. Its depth is more than 40,000 feet. The borehole is exclusively the result of a scientific drilling project in the northeastern part of the Baltic Shield, in the area where lower part of the Earth's crust gets close to the surface. At the best of times, the Kola Super Deep Borehole was operated by 16 research labs that were guided by the Minister of Geology himself. A lot of interesting discoveries were made from this well. For example, there was proof that life on Earth arose 1.5 billion years earlier than anticipated. At depth where there couldn't be any organic life, as generally believed, have been discovered 14 species of fossilized microorganisms. The age of these deep layers exceeds 2.8 billion years. In 2008, the site was abandoned and all the equipment was dismantled. Now the well is sealed and slowly collapsing. The cost for the reconstruction is around 100 million rubles. 8th place. The world's most expensive nuclear power plant in Shulkina, Crimea. For the construction of the site, an estimated 5 million rubles was spent in the early 80s, but the construction was never completed. The facility did not work as a power plant, and it was a good thing. The nuclear power plant was located on Kerch Peninsulas. The waters of the Azov Sea were supposed to be a cooling system of the station. The nearby city of Shulkina was constructed especially for the maintenance of the power plant. There were expected to reside workers and their families. But the work for the construction had proceeded slowly. As a former station worker says, the main reason the site was never finished were gaps in calculations and feasibility. The territory of the peninsula was largely unexplored, and no seismic characteristics study were done. The station was found to be located on a geologically volatile site. The researchers and journalists have tried to publish terrible facts, but they were being silenced. It turns out, if the construction of the Crimea nuclear power plant was completed, later it would become a second Chernobyl. The Azov Sea would turn to a nuclear swamp, and construction workers' gaps would turn a blooming peninsula to a forever restricted area. When the Chernobyl disaster occurred, it was less than a year before the Crimea nuclear power plant was supposed to launch. Of course, the construction was stopped. The building of the nuclear power station entered into the Guinness Book of Records as the most expensive reactor construction in world history. 7th place. the missile gallery in the woods nearby of Brody, Lviv Oblast. It's a former missile complex, one of the many top-secret strategic bases the USSR left behind. Brody base was divided into two parts: residential, with abandoned houses, garages, utility rooms, and the field located below with grants, mines, and multi-story underground communications. The former prisoners who couldn't settle anywhere after serving their sentence lived in residential area, but most importantly, stored the weapons of mass destruction. There were 4 missiles with an active range of up to 5,000 kilometers. Each nuclear explosive device had weighed more than 5 tons. They said the military power of ballistic missiles that were stored nearby the village were equaled the whole front force. The locals described the military base as top secret. A 24-hour security didn't allow anyone to enter their territory. Even a bird couldn't fly in. The whole area of the secret base was fenced with metal electric grid of 800 to 3,600 volts. Sixth place. Crimea spaceport for the Buran program. Those who traveled by car from Simferopol to Yevpatoria know that about 10 kilometers from Simferopol, in the middle of the steppe, the road suddenly turns to a tunnel. The locals say that it's a tunnel under the runway at Simferopol airport. That it's true, but not the whole story. There is a spare landing strip located for the USSR reusable spacecraft Buran. The design of the Buran was similar to the US shuttles, and only 3 units were built in the middle of the 80s. The Buran's lone flight was completed successfully on November 15, 1988, without a crew, but autopilot mode. Takeoff complex and main airfield were located at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. The spare landing strips were in Crimea and the Baltic states, but Buran never landed there. Originally, the flight with a crew was scheduled by the early 90s. After the USSR was collapsed, it was rescheduled numerous times and after all was completely cancelled. The Buran that went through the durability test turned into a tourist attraction in Moscow. Other 2 spacecrafts lie abandoned in a hangar at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. As for the spare landing strip in Crimea, there are projects to use it for conventional aviation, but any specific results are not yet known. Fifth place. Object 221 in Crimea. It's the biggest underground facility on the peninsula, the spare command post for the Black Sea Fleet. It's a network of tunnels where even a Kamaz easily can fit. The tunnels lead to the large facilities where the Black Sea Fleet headquarters offices would be located in case nuclear war breaks out. The leaders of the USSR were afraid of nuclear strike against the city of Sevastopol and decided to build the underground bunker in Alsu mountain. From inside the bunker, USSR leaders would countermeasure any attacks. In case of nuclear threat, 10,000 people of the Black Sea Fleet officers and their families were supposed to be evacuated underground. The bunker were 90% built but abandoned in 1992. Since then, it's still been collected for its scrap metal. Until this day, some companies provide tours to Object 221. Fourth place, the missile silos in the Sheldony Forest in Moldova. The construction of the Warsaw Pact Spare Command Post were built in case of nuclear threat. It began during the 80s in the village of Alyoshka in Moldavian SSR. It had to provide up to 24 hours of complete isolation. The facility is cyclopean-shaped. It makes a strong impression on the size, but the labor and materials that was wasted cost 32 million rubles. Back then, the cost of 5-store apartment block was 1 million rubles. The construction was over when the USSR collapsed in 1991. The object on its final stage of readiness would present a 2-cylindrical block building, 36-meter diameter and 50-meter deep with 10-12 floors each. As of 2009, the scrap metal hunters are destroying the facility. It's flooded up to 6th floor, including the supply unit. The floors below the 3rd floor can be accessed only using climbing gear. Third place, the secret base Anadyr 1 in Chukotka. Among all abandoned military camps in the post-Soviet space, the secret base Anadyr 1, also called Gudym, is the most extraordinary. The facility was built in 1958, and in 1961 the first military units have been put on alert there. The purpose of the object was to store and maintain nuclear weapons. The object was under command of the 12th Main Department of the Ministry of Defense of the USSR. It was an underground facility with mile-long tunnels. The base was fully protected against a nuclear strike. Inside it was divided into zones with different access levels. The cargo transportation were through narrow underground railroad. The story goes that the base was secured with a few levels of military guards. In the most secret levels were stored the missile warheads that could destroy military objects in the western United States. Second place, Semipalatinsk test site in Kazakhstan. It was one of the biggest nuclear test sites in the USSR, also known as STS or Semipalatinsk 21, which before kept the most modern nuclear weapons. There are only 4 such objects in the world. The Soviet Union conducted 468 nuclear tests at Semipalatinsk from 1949 until 1989. At least 616 nuclear and thermonuclear devices were blown up. In the dangerous areas of the former test site, the radiation level still reaches 10-20 millirangens per hour. The radioactive clouds from 55 open-air and above-ground detonations, gas fraction of 169 underground detonations went out of the site area. These explosions had resulted in radioactive contamination in the eastern Kazakhstan. The territory of the test site was not secured and appeared on the map only in 2006. First place. Cold storage facility number 2 in Samara. Soviet authorities were keeping inside this giant underground fridge their strategic surplus of food in the event of war. In total, the refrigerated storage can hold 16,400 tons of food. This huge fridge is at the edge of Samara in a quiet place. You can pass it 10 times and would never suspect that a 2-story miserable building made of red brick is the secret facility. Actually, it's a famous Samara underground fridge entrance. The fish, meat, canned food was sent there from all over the Soviet Union. When food got close to the expiration date, it was distributed in the stores for sale and new fresh food arrived. The last Soviet Union consignment, 300 tons of butter, was taken out in 1992. After, the facility stopped to be a state strategic storehouse. The walls of the mountain were caved in. The majority spaces were frozen over 10 meters away from the refrigerator for all these years. And the huge ice crystals have grown on their vaults. The most interesting about this place is an incredible amount of abandoned tunnels, where you can be easily lost. Recently, this unique facility was opened to the public and it's now a tourist attraction. This is it. If it was interesting, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you, friends.